Today on The Daily Charge, YouTube stops targeted ads towards kids, cutting the cord for good with 5G, and the name of the next Android operating system is...
Good morning and welcome to CNET's Daily Charge. It's Thursday, August 22nd. I'm Claire Riley.
And I'm Eli Blumenthal.
Let's get to today's main story. It's official, Android Q has a name, but forget your sweet tooth. After Marshmallow, Nougat, Oreo, and Pie, the next generation of Android will simply be called Android 10. Google's head of Android, Samir Samat, said it's important for the names to be, quote, clear and relatable for everyone in the world. Now, the operating system is set to launch in the coming weeks. There's no firm date yet, and it'll bring support for things like foldable screens, gesture navigation, and new privacy features like more granular location controls. Now, what do you reckon, Eli? Do you think it's, quote, simpler and more intuitive, as Google says, or has the company lost its sense of fun?
It's definitely simpler from finding a dessert with a Q name.
Yeah.
I can't really think of one. I don't know if you can.
I put the challenge out to our audience. If you can think of a Q dessert or sweet, I was deep in the bowels of the internet today trying to find something.
Yeah, so from that, it doesn't really make sense for them to go with the dessert name again. I guess they could do quesadilla, which I guess could technically...
You could get a chocolate quesadilla. I'd be down for that.
Yeah, so I guess that would have worked.
Yeah, it's
maybe
sort of...
Nestle Quick. We were talking with some colleagues if
Yeah.
they wanted to go with another partnership.
Yeah, well, they did the Kit Kat and they did the Oreo kind of cross-branding
Which
promotional
is good
stuff.
because then, when you get to S, you can have a Android Snickers.
Oh, absolutely.
Which would be great.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of peanuts.
But yeah, otherwise, apparently there are some issues with languages. LNR, Samir Samat writes in his blog post, were indistinguishable in certain languages, so that was some confusion for people. Obviously, the Q dessert name probably played a role, I would imagine. As for the sense of fun, yeah, it seems like there's a little bit of the whimsy is gone from Google now.
I think it's sort of one of those logical progressions that we've seen all of the brands go towards just numbered operating systems. Google was always that kind of, we're fun, we've got our little Android robot and we're really cool. Also, the logo is changing a bit, but I guess it does make sense. I'm a bit sad. Part of me has died today. I was living in hope. I think it's also interesting now that we have iPhone had the iPhone 10, which was an X, and now Android Q is pronounced Android 10. So I feel like words don't mean anything and language is dead.
That's definitely fair. And
yeah.
To your point on the number 10, I mean, you now have Windows 10, Android 10, Mac OS 10. Lots of 10s when it comes to software and technology.
We've also got a couple of devices out there that are 10s.
Right,
so...
the Huawei Mate 10, that foldable phone, also with an X.
Yep, we got
Galaxy
the
Note 10,
Note
S10.
10, S10. I feel like maybe we're just going to reach a stage where what happens when we get into the 11s?
That'd be a great question, possibly for Apple in a few weeks.
Yeah,
we'll see. If
September
they ever do anything then.
September is going to change all of our worlds. All right. Also in the news today, if you're tired of dealing with your cable company, 5G could let you cut ties with them for good. The next generation of wireless technology is coming out and it's rolling out across the world, but it's already being touted as a possible replacement for traditional home broadband. The real question is, will 5G hold up to household use, and are you going to pay for it through the nose? That's the most important question. Now, Eli, you've been playing around with 5G at home as a kind of a replacement for your home broadband. What's your verdict?
I've been using an early version of Sprint's 5G network, which isn't officially live in New York, but you can find it in certain spots.
If you know the right guys.
They sell the devices all across the country, but in certain areas, as they get ready to turn it on, they already are testing it, so you can hop on to that network in advance. And where I live, there happens to be 5G, and it works really well as home broadband. There's still a lot of kinks that need to be worked out. I had some issues with Xbox and Netflix on certain devices, but speeds were generally between 100 to 200 megabits per second, which is on par with what a lot of people get at home. It's actually, I think, a little bit faster than the national average last year from, I believe it was Ookla, the guys who do speed test. So as far as playing games on Xbox or streaming 4K Netflix, browsing the web, all the things you use the internet for, it was perfectly fine.
The real question, I think, is going to be what would your data allowance be and how quickly you're going to burn through that data allowance? Because I was reading your story this morning. You had a great feature up on CNET about it. And talking about streaming a show in 4K, for example, to your TV, suddenly you're burning through that data reasonably quickly. And if you don't have the data cap to match it, it doesn't matter what your speeds are. If you're burning through and then you get kind of, if you get tapered on your speeds, that's going to be where people get annoyed.
And that's a great point because I was watching a 16-minute episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee on Netflix, the Jerry Seinfeld show, in 4K, streaming over 5G, 16 minutes, 2.2 gigabytes, which for your home broadband, where you generally don't have data caps, that's not a big deal. It doesn't really matter. But Verizon and Sprint, who are the two carriers who are publicly selling hotspots that work with 5G networks, AT&T has one too, but AT&T isn't letting any consumers on their network yet. If you're going to do that, having a data cap for Verizon's case of 50 gigs or in Sprint's case 100 gigs, you're going to hit that pretty quickly if you're watching a lot of Netflix in 4K.
Yeah, it changes a lot. All right, we'll have to talk to the audience. I'm keen to hear what you think about whether you'd cut ties with your cable company, whether that'd be a good thing. But finally, I want to get to our last story. Won't somebody think of the children? YouTube is reportedly going to stop, quote, targeted ads on videos aimed at kids. That's according to Bloomberg. This follows an investigation by the Federal Trade Commission in the US into whether YouTube's ads violated the privacy of children on the platform. Now, YouTube has come under fire in the past for the way some content is served to kids on its platform. Do you think this change to ads was inevitable?
Definitely. YouTube has, the troubles that YouTube has had, especially of late, are very well known and well documented. We've been covering it intensely. It's a rabbit hole for conspiracy theories, all kinds of doctored videos, and a whole host of messes, really. For them to finally take a stand, it's actually kind of encouraging.
Yeah.
They have a lot of work to do, but give them kudos for at least doing maybe one thing right now. Getting
the ball rolling and probably trying to get out in front of the regulators, who were potentially going to clamp down with some tough rules. Maybe they wanted to get in front and be showing to be doing something. I think the thing with YouTube is it's all about that recommendation algorithm, and so therefore also how ads are targeted through essentially just a lot of pulling of data and automatically selecting ads to serve to you. I think that the issue around this was that ads that are served based on how you browse the internet, what you're doing elsewhere online, they were considered, if you're tracking that information about kids and they're under the age of 13, that's against the COPPA Act, the Children's Online Privacy Act. So that's the problem. It's not that, okay, this ad is for kids, so therefore we'll just match it with an ad for, this is a YouTube video for toys, so we'll match it with an ad for toys. It was much more kind of granular and detailed. So I think it's a good move. I think their recommendations and how all that stuff is happening automatically on YouTube, that's where the problems lie.
Right, the algorithm definitely seems to be the issue.
Yeah.
And people have figured out ways to game that system and get millions of views and influence millions of people because of it.
Yeah,
that's still the root issue, and that's something that they still need to address in a pretty big way and pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think especially when you're talking about kids on YouTube, obviously you've got the YouTube Kids app, which ideally Google wants everyone to kind of just put their content on there, but they had the whole scandal with Elsa Gate, the weird Disney character videos. It was a little off-brand, quite terrifying. I think they really, need to watch it. Also, maybe parents need to stop using YouTube as a babysitter. That is
definitely another alternative here, and one that should also be considered.
Definitely. All right, so we've reached our favorite part of this show, the live Q&A. Now, the daily charge greatly depends on our audience feedback, so if you have questions or comments about today's topics, would you cut the cord? Are you glad that those ads are going? Or, would you just fire them off in the chat and hit us up on Twitter? So make sure you get us those questions in. And BVG, why don't I throw to you? What are our topics and questions today?
Obviously, there's a lot of chatter going on about Android Q, Android 10, Android X beta, whatever. I don't care anymore. I am completely disenfranchised and heartbroken this morning to wake up to that news. That was very, very boring and disappointing, and I think we should move on from the topic. But no one else will. Let's go ahead and throw to our old friend Ayaz, the Alphabet City guy for some. He says, 10 is my favorite dessert. What's yours?
Look, I'm over here in the States, and you can obviously tell from the accent. I went out to a restaurant the other night where dessert was literally just a bowl of sweetened whipped cream. So I don't know that maybe Americans can be trusted to name things after desserts and candy.
Everybody
There.
knows traditional American dessert is hamburgers.
Yeah, it's got all the important food groups in there. I don't know. I was trawling around trying to find a cool name for it this morning, and the best I could come up with was like quinceañera candy. I don't think that's really counted. So
Yeah, BVG, you don't like the name. What would you recommend? What is your Q alternative?
My recommendation is for someone at Google to try harder.
Well, I mean, with N, they just put it out to like an audience vote, so I guess they didn't really try there. And then Oreo, I don't know.
Oreo, Kit Kat, they just partnered up there.
Yeah, Oreos are known around the world, but I just don't think they're as big outside the States. So when everyone was like, that's a universally loved cookie, I was like, I mean, there's naming things. I definitely see how going global and recognizing that they've got their big kid shoes on now, that they can't just call everything after a lolly. But, you know, it's a little disappointing. Now, do you call it nougat?
Nougat, yeah.
Oh, gosh. Everything's
How do you
difficult.
pronounce it?
Nougat. It's just a bit
Oh,
fancier.
Yeah, so much fancier.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it makes sense.
I mean, they have 2.5 billion devices around the world that are active right now. You can't just play a regional game with
Yeah.
the naming. You have to have something that's consistent, and there's nothing more consistent than numbers.
Yeah, I suppose so. And I'm kind of keen to see
boring,
some of
though.
the... Yeah, it's boring. I'm keen to see some of the features when they roll out because I'm a keen Android user. So, you know, things like privacy controls, that's a really big one. Apple played really hard with that at their WWDC conference. We saw them talking about being able to control what information you get out there. I think that's a really big topic in the new era. So, yeah, I'll be keen to see what features actually come to our phones along with the name.
And I'm curious who's going to go to 11 first to just do that Spinal Tap
Oh, yeah.
reference.
Yeah.
Because someone's going to do it. The
Yeah,
question is who gets there first. Is it Apple in September? Is it, Android next year?
You're
Is it
speaking
Windows at
BBG's
some
language
point?
there. You're speaking BBG's language. All right, what else have we got? Any more thoughts on Q?
Well, I just want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at The Verge. I don't know who wrote this, but whoever came up with the sub headline, Google quietly quashes its naming quandary. Delicious. Absolutely the best part of today. Besides the fact, hey, little trivia, it is Ray Bradbury's birthday. So I thought I'd bring that up so I could put a little bit of a positive spin on what is otherwise really lame news. Michael Brown says, so is it safe to say, now that we know Android is only in its 10th version, that as a platform, it can't be compared to iOS's upcoming 13th version? Now, let it be known, Michael Brown is our resident Apple fan. He's always got really intelligent things to say, contributing to the positive aspects of Apple when most of us kind of like take jabs at him. I'm curious to think, like, will 10 being a shift in the paradigm for Google, for Android, will they actually put a little extra effort into it? Do you think we've seen all that there is to see with the beta?
I mean, I think I'd like to hope that there's a couple of tricks up their sleeves that they didn't necessarily reveal with the beta. My comment on the 10 versus 13, like, numbers are meaningless. And Note, which was it? The Note skipped, I think we had one of the devices skip a number. The Note 8 wasn't a thing. And then, like, I feel like 10 versus 13, it's not one is better than the other. Hopefully we do see...
Windows skipped 9.
That's it, right? Because of... I heard that was a kind of a coding thing because of... it was like if Windows 9... X, referring to things like Windows 95, Windows 97. It was just like a basic thing in the architecture of how everything was structured behind the scenes. I don't know if that's true. Feel free to just like hit us up and tell me I'm completely wrong.
I thought it was just a bad 789 joke.
Yeah, right. Oh gosh. I don't know. I want to see some more features coming out because it feels like we see a lot of attention around iOS and cool features that come with that OS. I'm hoping that Android users get some kind of sexy new tips and tricks, but I don't know whether we will have seen everything from beta. I mean, there was quite a bit in there with things like gesture control, privacy controls, things like location tracking. As a privacy narc, I'm very keen on kind of being able to shut that off.
Yeah, well, I think the next time we'll see a big release around Android 10 now will be when Google, I guess, finally releases the Pixel 4 that they've been talking about and teasing for, I guess, now months. That there's going to be something, they've already started talking about some of the voice assistant, Google Assistant improvements that are going to be coming to the next Pixel. So we'll be interesting to see what they do there. The other thing that's curious to me about Android 10 is foldable displays. Obviously, that category has taken a massive step back with everything that's been going on with the Fold. One of the big points of Android 10 when it was announced and when it was called, Android Q with all that whimsy and magic
There were
behind
simpler
it.
times.
Those simpler times was that it would support foldable displays. Obviously, we haven't had a foldable phone really come out to the market. Huawei's been delayed. Samsung's been delayed. Who knows, who else had stuff. There's rumors of a Motorola Razr flip foldable.
Is it good to have that kind of functionality baked in, even if you don't use it straight away? A good example is the new generation of the Apple Watch. In Australia, we don't have kind of FDA approval for EKG functionality. So it's capable, like it's the actual device, it can give you an echocardiogram, but you can't actually use it in Australia. So it's just like switched off. So maybe it makes sense to have support for foldables in there, but it's just not fully activated and unleashed on the world.
So not having it unleashed on the world is obviously disappointing for those who don't get access to the new features, but having them baked into the OS can also push manufacturers who don't have to focus on the software side to focus on innovating around the hardware side, which is what they do best.
Yeah.
So I would say that, having it on the software is great.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right, BVG. What are our thoughts on Android Q? I'm interested if is everyone like super obsessed with this Q10 name
Not
today?
so much, but I will give another shout out to Brian, who came to my rescue, and he pointed out that there is I believe it is a Spanish dish. I'm gonna try to pronounce it, and I'm gonna butcher it. Quijadina, and it's this like sweet cupcake thing. Take a look at this. That's what Android should have done. Doesn't that look appetizing? Doesn't that look massively appealing?
Ooh, round flavor discs.
Yes. I'm not even sure what it's made of. I'm going to go watch this recipe later and probably be more disappointed in that than
We've
I am
got
in
to
the
stop
name.
doing this show before lunch, BVG.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, just proof in the pudding that there is a Q-based dessert out there.
Or
in fact,
as they
we came
call
up
it
with
in
a list a
England,
couple
they
weeks
call
ago.
it pudding. So, yes, proof is in the pudding.
Don't you call everything pudding in England?
Well,
Not you, I mean,
not
like...
me. I don't live in England, but everything's pudding. Everything's dinner and everything's sweeties. And gosh, that's the other problem. We call things different things around the world. So I see why they're going to numbers. Numbers are the universal language.
Very good point. All right, taking a look back at the chat. Here's one from Terry. He says, they all look alike, sound alike, do everything alike. Might as well call modern phones the duck. What does that mean?
I think if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm
quacks like a
thinking.
duck,
Oh, okay.
then it's a duck. I'm hoping that's what he means. Otherwise, like, he's just going real surrealist on us and just bringing an element of data into the show today.
And we've gotten weirder on the show, so why not? Matthew Datcher, how long until we move beyond 10? Mac has been on X since 2000. Good point.
That's a great question. And I don't think Windows 10 has been on 10 for a couple years now too.
Yeah.
So
Maybe.
I don't know why technology companies are so hung up on the number 10.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like a full completeness thing that they're going for.
Well, there are elements to numbers that have these kind of the roundness to them. 2000 was a way of saying something was really futuristic in the 90s. So,
Right.
Ironically appealing in a country that refuses to adopt or is still stuck in the empirical form of measurement.
I can't even talk to you about this. Why don't you join the metric system? It's great. Everything's base 10. You just bring it up by 10.
Don't get mad at me. It would make my life easier in electrical engineering, that's for damn sure.
I'm personally mad at you, Brian, and I'm gonna continue this crusade because if someone tells me that it's 73 degrees outside one more time, and I just have to sit there with this vacant look on my face as I quietly convert it, and
All
then
right,
come
it's
back.
I will
83 today.
defend Fahrenheit only because it does seem more daunting to say it's 100 outside. If you want to talk about round numbers, something that's going to scare me from ever going outside again, it's 100.
Yeah, if I
Yeah.
hear it's 32 degrees outside, I'm thinking like, okay, I'll take a jacket. That's not what 32 degrees Celsius is.
Yeah,
Having
32
having a
is.
jacket, bundling up is a bad idea.
Yeah, it's 32-ish
dangerous,
today.
really.
I think it's 32 today. I had someone describe it, Fahrenheit, you just remember as like how comfortable you are. I think of it as a percentage. 100, you're at your max. 73, that's a really good, comfortable 3/4 of the way temperature. So
There we go. You should switch
this
to our
is-
system.
This has been Weather Chat on Daily Charge. Happy to bring it to you every Thursday, the 22nd of August. Look, I think it's a beautiful number. The imperial system is broken. That's my hot take.
That's not a very hot take at all. Let's do something good for somebody. Our friend Esben is visually impaired, so accessibility is very key for them when buying devices. Will the new Android accessibility options be better than Apple's?
That's a really good question. I mean, obviously, a lot of device makers, hardware manufacturers are moving towards that because, I mean, sometimes it makes sense in terms of just making all of their consumers happy, and they're realizing that accessibility is a big part of the market. And sometimes it also makes sense for everybody. You know, we saw that with WWDC, one of the features.
Apple spent a lot of time talking about, and one of their first ads about iOS 13 out of WWDC was focusing on accessibility. And it's great to see that finally, after all this time, technology companies, Google, Microsoft obviously having the Xbox adaptive controller, that Super Bowl ad that they ran earlier this year, finally focusing on a market that's long been ignored. It's long overdue.
And not that this is a justification for doing it, because the targeting customers who need accessibility options should be the end in and of itself. But with some of the features announced at WWDC, they kind of were good for, the mass market as well. Some of those are the ability for the kind of the inputs and ability to bring a keyboard in. That was designed as an accessibility feature, but it makes sense for everyone. So I think some of these features are winner for everyone. And if they're not, then they aren't a kind of an impediment to anyone else, so why wouldn't you just bake them in terms of whether if you're buying device to device, what's going to be better? I know that, my understanding is Apple is still probably the strongest in market on accessibility. We have a lot of chats with them about the features that they're bringing out and trying to design accessible devices. I think maybe it's going to be when we see the actual Android 10, I was about to say Q again. When we see it roll out, we might get to go hands-on with some of those things and really see how they work. But I think, that's a good question that I'm not able to directly answer.
Well, we still have to see the final forms of both iOS 13 and Android 10 to know exactly which one is better or worse. But either way, the fact that Apple is spending so much time on this with iOS 13 and Google's starting to talk about it more, pushing each other to make it better, everybody wins in the end.
Yeah, and I think things like live captioning, that's really good for the hearing impaired community. Gesture controls, maybe making things easier to use rather than having to fiddle with tiny buttons. So I see those as big wins, yeah.
All right, we have a few minutes left, so let's shift gears. A lot of people want to talk about YouTube as well, and there's some really good commentary here. Yan says, so what happens to those content creators who create content for kids? Like Ryan reviews toys. Will they see a significant decline in revenue? That might be unfair to them. Now, that's a good point. There's not to take away from the wholesomeness that there is for potential advertisers and content for younger audiences, but will that impact these content creators who are specifically appealing to that younger demographic?
I think quite potentially it could. I mean,
it's a balance YouTube has to navigate. That's part of this problem, is figuring out a way to clean up the mess while not harming the people that make the platform so great. And that's something that's been their problem with every aspect of all these issues that they've had, is rooting out the bad while still keeping the good.
Yeah, in the Bloomberg story, they spoke to some experts who said that they estimate YouTube's revenue from children's media at being between 500 to 750 million a year. And one of the experts, the analysts they spoke to, said potentially they could be curbing revenues there by about 10%, so maybe 50 million. It's hard to know, but it definitely is a feature where you'll see, ad buyers and the advertising community, they really like to be able to target as closely as possible, not just people watching basketball videos, but maybe people from the age of 35 to 43 who are interested in buying basketball sneakers because they also have a pet dog that they go running with. So maybe being able to track that less is going to be a problem. But I think if you build your whole model on targeting children in such a sort of a niche way, there's probably something that's a bit broken in it anyway.
Yeah.
I would think that hopefully kids content, if it becomes the standard across the board that everyone has to play by these new rules, then advertisers will target niche kids creators. So like the Ryan Reviews Toys, I think it was, maybe they'll be able to say, all right, well, we know that your channel just does unboxings, or we know that your channel just talks about Peppa Pig, so we are going to target and make sure that our ads are on your channel. So maybe those niche creators will actually win out of this because they have a very clear purpose to their channel.
And with all these changes, one thing that's been constant is everybody adapts, for good and for bad. When YouTube or Google rolls out an algorithm change, everybody changes what they're doing to accommodate. So I think that people, while it is going to be something they're going to have to navigate, I do think that they will be fine because everyone's going to follow whatever it is that I guess YouTube is laying down.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw that with the news industry, seeing a lot of their stories get posted on Facebook and how their ad revenue streams changed. All of these companies adapt. They all constantly pivot to work with how the market works. I think ultimately the win for the kids is going to be the thing that rules out in the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a little floored that they haven't been able to enact a little bit more, I want to say organization, aggregation. A little bit more human involvement would have gone a long way in this case. Now, don't they have a separate YouTube Kids app? Why can't they just kind of sort that hierarchy, put this content there, restrict it? I mean, they should have no problem turning that into a whole new app or platform in itself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issues
And that's
are...
easier said than done. I think a lot of people are just going to youtube.com or opening up the YouTube app on their phone and searching there.
Age verify that stuff, man.
What was that?
Age verify it.
I guess you can, but then you have to have people log in every time.
And people always tell the truth about their age on the internet, don't they?
Good point.
I mean, I heard this week that that YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. So if people aren't going to google.com and typing in their search, they're going to YouTube and typing in their search there. So,
doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
You know, there's so much, there's, billions of hours of content on there. You have to rely on machines. You have to rely on kind of intelligent systems to do the heavy lifting for you, hopefully with some sort of human level of moderation. But, this is the perpetual struggle that tech companies have. They're constantly balancing the need for human level moderation with the ability to just mass move everything through, because they need to just have a view over the content that's going up onto their platform. Facebook had the issue with human moderators saying that they were seeing some really terrible things in their jobs as moderators. So it's really hard to strike that balance.
And on the other side of things, even when you have the human moderators, do you really want people knowing what you're doing? I mean, that's a discussion that we're having right now around AI and digital assistants, and how Microsoft, Apple, everybody, Google, I think Google as well, have been using these contractors to help fine-tune, Amazon, I believe as well, fine-tune their digital assistants.
Yeah, so it's kind of having a human, like when I ask my Echo something and I assume that it's just being handled by a machine, I think one of the big ones was Facebook Messenger voice to text. They discovered that actually humans were listening to some of those voice messages, and maybe users didn't realize that level of human oversight was happening. So suddenly it's not just a machine that's just anonymously looking at this data, it's someone listening into your conversation. It's a really interesting point as well, yeah.
Well, we're at the end of the road, unfortunately. We are a little bit out of time, a little bit over, to be honest, but that's okay because it was a good conversation today. I did want to bring up before we said goodbye that Brian points out other YouTubers that when they get demonetized or they're hurting for support, they can turn to things like Patreon or direct sponsorship in their videos. So that might be the best course of action for people seeing impact. Is this going to be like Adpocalypse 2 Kids Edition? Is that what we're going with here?
It very well could be. Adpocalypse 2, you heard it here first. All right. Thanks again for joining us, everybody who's watching. Just a reminder that we do stream live here on YouTube, on Periscope, and at cnet.com/dailycharge, weekday mornings at 11:15 a.m. Eastern. Now, if you are enjoying the show, please go ahead, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, smash the bell, hit us up on Twitter. You can join us every morning for the Daily Charge. I am Claire Riley.
I'm Eli Blumenthal.
Thank you so much for watching.